Okay, let me hydrate and let me reposition this a little bit. Yeah, I think that's probably good right there. And let's see, yesterday was Tuesday, and I had lunch with Robert Frazier Sensei. He was my very first Aikido teacher. He was he still is a professor, but he was teaching psychology at Merrill College, University of California, Santa Cruz. And he started an Aikido club, fall of 1969, which is actually where I started. Okay, my first class was somewhere probably October, beginning of October when the school year started. It was Monday, Wednesday nights, and it was in the field house. There's probably a couple there now, but it was the original field house of the first one. And we basically were on the basketball courts, and we pulled out wrestling mats, and we would do that. The second quarter, we moved off campus because intramural basketball started. And so that was no longer available. And so we moved, I believe, to Mission Hill Junior High School, and it was included as part of the Parks and Rec department. And so we gathered a couple of people from the community. Eventually, Glenn Kimoto Sensei from Santa Cruz, he came in when we moved to Mission Hill. And so it was really fun to kind of catch up with Frazier Sensei yesterday. We're both Gemini, so we tend to talk on a wide range of topics. It's interesting that for me, since before the pandemic, this is the first time I actually did something out other than just running errands or buying groceries or, putting gas in the car, things like that. It's pretty much just been survival mode. And it was the very first thing, apparently, in terms of lunch out or meal out that he had done. So that was a great honor that actually I was the first. And he was also my first actual contact in a social situation. And we went to Valley Fair. No, we went to Santana Row, very different, right across the street, but different. And we went to a French restaurant, and I had some onion soup, which shot my blood sugar up, but it came back down this morning, thank goodness. And that was about it. And, we spoke on a wide range of topics, which we tend to do, both Gemini. And so, yeah, that was really fun. And one of the things that kind of came up a little bit, because we started the conversation and both he and I had watched the Netflix show that I've been kind of talking about a bit called Queen's Gambit. And he told me about a book that was written by psychologists on flow and how the psychologist really talked about movement, of course, but also chess masters, that what exactly we think I'm flowing. But on the other hand, the flow is both a mind and a body and a mind state. And I guess one of the things we look at is a flow is an optimal being place. You see, and there's an area where, you sort of, everybody has experiences, and they talk about, you are in the zone. And so it's sort of difficult to describe that in words, because an optimal being place is being in the moment and letting things kind of unfold, but you're right there in the unfolding. And so that was interesting, because we were talking about chess and how, we think of flow as movement, but, the whole character in there, she's a woman. Chess is not terribly, related, women, men, women play, but, at that time there were separate divisions, and for her to kind of go forward and forward and forward and to eventually beat the world champion, the Soviet master. This was in the late 1960s timeline for the TV show, and how she would do things at night when she was really young, about look up at the ceiling and see the chessboard. And I guess, we read Osensei's words, and the real tricky thing, is that words, oftentimes when you're in that state, if you'd ask for words, words like effortless or amazing, or you're kind of outside of time space, there's a couple of instances, sometimes when you hit it, probably my best basketball game in high school, we were playing, I was B League, or, which means it's kind of like there's the varsity, and then there's like a junior varsity, which is like bigger players that didn't quite make the varsity. And then there's kind of like, basically, like the B level, which is kind of like for younger players. But since I was short, I qualified for that all through my high school, lightweight division, whatever they call it. And we were, usually what happens is that the younger players, if you have real potential, you play B. In those days, I don't know what it is now. And if you don't, you're stuck in junior varsity, all right? But junior varsity is big. And, you can have promise as a younger high school player, at least in those days, and you could, they don't stick you with the junior varsity. You have to play B League or whatever it is. And so, we were playing another team's junior varsity team, big. We had players that were younger. I was kind of like a senior, so I was small, so I could do that. So it was my fourth year, and so they, nothing like these days. This was high school. They would sort of they would scout. Like he knew, for example, my high school coach knew that the other team was going to play a zone. Okay. And so we had inside players and everything, but it wasn't going to work because they were big and they were kind of slow, but they're going to play a zone, which means, it's going to be difficult to get the ball inside to your interior players because they got all these trees. They may not be terribly good, but they're big, right? And so he comes up to me and says, okay, we're going to kind of feature you because you've got deep range. I said, I do. He said, yeah, you can shoot, which is true, but not just shoot, but shoot from way, it's more of a, like a Stephen Curry. He not only can make a shot, he has deep range, right? And so, you would pass, and so the whole week was me catching the ball. They would pass it to me, and I would shoot. And so it was funny because it was a Saturday night game, and there was something that was going on that same day, which means it was honor band. I was supposed to play an honor band. It was a choice: basketball or music. So what did I do? I signed off honor band. decided to play basketball. Because I sort of knew this was my moment. Because most of the time, you're, okay, Wada, shoot, but on the other hand, this is like, you got to shoot. Okay, so what happened is, I'm kind of more a sub, really. I mean, it was, because they really emphasize younger players. And so we're 10 points behind, which in high school is like, I don't know what it is. And so he says, okay, your time in the game. And I kind of hit, I think, like my first 4 shots. It was almost like, it was like, and what happened, it disrupted their zone. They couldn't play zone anymore. And so in the first half, we actually go from 10 points down to 10 points in the lead. And it was more than just my shots. But what happens is when I hit those 4 shots, they can't play zone anymore. But it was it was that space, kind of that zone, so to speak. And I wasn't really known I could shoot, but one of the reasons I didn't play more was dribbling, defense, things like that. And so it was a magical experience because all of a sudden they get out of the zone, right? And they were smaller but much faster, and that they can't zone us. All right, and so all of a sudden, I'm the lead guard, the point guard here, making passes off the fast break that I didn't know I could make. And this one guy gets the ball, I defend him. He goes to the hoop, I block the shot. Stuff I never did, but it was kind of like a magical night. And so if somebody were to say, what is it like, in terms of that, that's what stands out for me. And I remember Joseph Campbell, when he did The Power of Myth, this comes up, that flow state. And so I think it was Bill Moyer who says, well, Joe, can you describe that state? And Campbell did a lot of things. Obviously, he was a mythologist, but he also, he was a musician. He played jazz. And he also, when he was in high school at Sarah Lawrence, he ran track. And what he brought up was, just like my instance, it wasn't anything academic or it wasn't anything with the music. It was more like, I'm running this race. I know from the beginning, I'm going to win. And every moment is just framed. And so I step in there, take off, and I float and win. It was almost like, I got to win. It's like, he's moving about that speed and he's out running everybody else. So, within that area, it's interesting that, I'm not Joseph Campbell or anything, but, you say Joseph Campbell, my own personal experience, if you were to ask what the words are like, it's a very intense, in the moment being state. And it's almost like there are 4 of your teammates and 5 others, but all there is that space that is the basketball hoop. And there's that center in you and the 2 talk, and time kind of stands still. And when the shots start to go in, all of a sudden I can handle the ball. See, it's funny because, he says, you got deep range. No, okay. No, I could shoot. But I had never been asked to shoot from 20 to 25 feet, which you have to be able to do to get, these big lumbering guys out of a zone. And so that sort of thing is amazing when you're kind of in that space. And, you know, it's not a thinking space, although it's kind of a knowing being space, like you're dribbling the ball and you don't even see that person over there, but you know that boom, you pass it and they score. You know, you know, the big guys, once they were out of the zone, they were horrible. And so it was very easy to say, okay, and somebody under the hoop and somebody, you know, who's going to come up and they're bigger than you, right? And then they're going to lay the ball in and you're the only defender. And what you do, you don't go up there and try to block the shot. It's that's okay. You just put your hand in as they're going to, because they expose the ball for a second, you've got the ball. You know, and it goes out of bounds off of them. And even my coach was clapping and stuff like that. It was, you know, most of the time he was yelling at me because I didn't play defense, you know. I mean, I did defense, you know. I could shoot. Yeah. And for that one night, you know, I was kind of like in that Stephen Curry mode. And that was like amazing. You go from 10 points down, which in high school is, you know, like a 20 to 30 point lead, you know, because they don't have a shot clock. And at the end of the half, we're 10 points ahead. That was kind of my flow moment. And I think I've had other experiences. But, you know, in a lot of ways, I mean, you have to have a certain amount of talent. But when you're in that zone, it's almost like whatever talent you have, you might discover, for example, that you have other talents, like the ability to pass. You know, all of a sudden I got the ball. I'm like the quarterback or the point guard, and you know, it's fast break, and so you know your teammates are moving, and you boom and boom, and you know things like that. So that was a flow experience. Now in Aikido, if you kind of look at O-sensei, for example, like a lot of times what we do is we kind of read from his words. But that was a description of him in some very ultimate flow state. He called that state being one with the universe. No time, no space. A floating bridge of heaven. There's a lot of ways that he describes it. You know, we're out there trying to do it that way. It's almost like we have to, you know, I think he created Aikido so the whole human race would experience this flow state and realize that we are one. And in that flow state, you know, there's discussion. There's not partisanship. In that flow state, there are disagreements which are worked out and lead to a healing, not hatred and violence. And so when he said, you know, the world is one family, he probably meant, can we get everybody in that flow state? Now, there are fancy words like enlightenment. Okay. And, you know, I have no idea. I mean, you know, for example, basketball-wise, you know, I kissed the ball. I was in a flow state, but anything else, I was lost in that game at that point, you know. I mean, later I started to understand a little bit, like I played intramurals because there were no teams per se at Santa Cruz. It was just intramural. So that was pretty big. And so you start to branch out, like, you know, I can handle and pass and everything like that. But in high school, you know, basically outside of that one game, all I could do is shoot. And that was what he needed. So, you know, the coach, you know, would normally say, you know, you can't play defense, you don't know how to pass, but you can shoot. Okay, that was my one realm. Because when I got the ball, that state would start. And so things like, you know, I graduated, you know, I kind of went from basketball. I was not going to play professional basketball, okay, or collegiate, all right, or anything like that. So, you know, I kind of gravitated to you know, martial arts, and also kind of some of the more, I would say some of the arts that gravitate more towards achieving a flow state, like Tai Chi is about being in that flow state. You know, Master Choi, for example, he would be in that flow state, and boom, sort of that no time, no space feeling. It's like hitting harder, hitting faster, but boom, 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 boom. And so one thing that Robert Fraser Sensei and I discussed a little bit was Master Choi, because Fraser Sensei actually, took one of my 30 movement online classes. Hopefully he'll join us tonight, because we're going to do a practice for the full form at 7:30. We sent the announcements out. And I made the second half for those that feel comfortable with it. Just go through the first part of the 54 movements, which actually is a lot easier in a lot of ways than doing the 30. The 30 is 6 weeks. And that's one of the things that is difficult, because some people learn. But I don't think you learn the zone. You have to know something. But if any of us were, for example, to say, what would I like? Well, I'd like to learn how to be in that zone. I mean, if you're a parent, you are in that zone as a parent. If you're a software engineer, you are in that zone. It may be work to other people, but for you, that's your arena. And the expression sometimes you play for pay. In other words, you've got something that you're doing that you love, because you love being in the zone, whether it's music or Stephen Curry, he loves basketball. He gets $40 million a year for doing that. That's kind of an ultimate, And so that area about what is the zone. And one thing that Robert Fraser pointed out, the book Flow, which I will investigate a bit, the author was a psychologist, a lot about chess. And that's kind of what about that? Because everybody can learn how the pieces move. Everybody might have a proclivity for being able to move the pieces well. But there are tiers. And then, if you really get interested in it, what you do is you study. Because you can study the game of master players. And you can understand why they did this or that. And that'll help you play. But then, there's that phenomenon of the zone. Where it all comes together in the moment. And I think one of the reasons that Aikido, for example, for so long, actually has fascinated people, because the structure of it gets you some level of flow. It's supposed to be non-competitive. We can make it that way because there's a lot of I or ego. Or I want this rank or something like that. But really, one of the things it can do is take you to your flow place. And if we kind of look at what O-sensei did, on some level, I mean, it's something so abstract and maybe so impossibly attainable for us that we go, or in my case, I'm fascinated by it. So, a lot of times I can look up in the ceiling and look at the universe in terms of components. That's what Nado Sensei and I, when we talk, that's what we try to do. How does Sensei move the pieces? Right? But that flow state is the flow state. You can have all this knowledge, Like you can have memorized how masters move the chess pieces, and still, yeah, you have that knowledge, but it's in the moment. And in the TV show, the Netflix series, Queen's Gambit, which I've been talking a lot about, they go into this young girl who learns basically the whole game from a janitor in the basement of her orphanage. And then she starts to beat him, and he's a good player. Then she starts to bring in other people, and she beats them at a really tiny age. And then, she's adopted, she goes out, she goes to high school, and, enters chess tournaments, beats everybody. And so she has that ability. It's almost like, from a young age, she was kind of, the chessboard brought her into that flow. And the fascinating part of it, is that you watch the show and, you're not there. I don't know things like the Sicilian defense or the Queen's Gambit, which is a move with a pawn to open the game. But it's almost like, if you're Stephen Curry, you see the whole court. You see what the defenders are. You see where your teammates are. And you see the situation with the clock. First quarter, lots of time. Fourth quarter, that's the determinant factor. Last 2 minutes, that's winning time. And what's interesting is, if we gotta win, we gotta win. But the flow state is more like, oh, wow. You don't just win, you hit that state. And it's almost like that state is the victory. Now, you could lose, in which case you're gonna be bummed, like, oh, we lost. But more likely than not, when you're in that flow state, if you're an athlete, you're going to win. And sometimes it's very elusive. The Warriors had a pretty good player. His name was Sleepy Floyd. And one of the highlights of being a Warrior fan was one year we actually made the playoffs. And we were trailing the Lakers, probably their best team. Magic Johnson, Kareem, Michael Cooper, there's a couple of others, James Worthy. It was an all-star team. The Warriors were like, nah. And what happened? They were down by 20 points going into the fourth quarter. And Sleepy Floyd was pretty much their star. And so, he basically, he was an interesting player because he could take it to the hoop. He wasn't fast, but he was clever, quick, creative. And he takes it to the hoop. And Michael Cooper, who's one of the best defenders in the league, was on him. And Cooper had been frustrating Floyd. And Floyd had a kind of a minor leg injury. And so, Floyd had made the all-star team, but Cooper was pretty much containing him. And I remember Floyd goes to the hoop, misses his first shot. I don't know how many in a row he hit, but he scores 29 points in that fourth quarter. And the Warriors, he guns that team down. He's like the lone gunfighter going to the den of the evil gang and winning. He was in that zone. I mean, I remember, the free throw line has corners, and the corners are the elbows. And one play, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar switches on him. And Floyd, he fades off of one foot, he's falling away, and he puts the ball up with spin that goes over Kareem, who's 7'1" or 2. It's high off the backboard. and goes in. And Chick Hearn, who was the legendary Laker announcer, he actually describes that fourth quarter. It was not a local guy. And so he's just in amazement. And Floyd never recaptured that. He was a good player, but he had that zone going for that one game. He was otherworldly. In fact, if you're a Warrior fan, there was that. And then the Warriors were awful for a long time. And in fact, they traded Sleepy Floyd. I remember I went to a game with my daughter. And what happened is we're watching. The Warriors, of course, lose. But Floyd's a good player. And so she looks at me and says, Dad, what would happen if the Warriors traded Sleepy Floyd away? And I kind of went, I don't know. So guess what they did? They traded Sleepy Floyd away because that's what they used to do. But, for that moment, that's what he's known for. 29 points in one quarter in a playoff game. And that was an elimination game. Now, the Lakers the next night, we went to LA and got killed. So they won the series 4-1, but there's that one moment. The zone. And what if that zone is always present? But what happens, we get trapped in what we call the I, And so, it's almost like what happens when you're in that zone. The I disappears. Now you exist there. Somebody has to hold and shoot the basketball. Somebody has to play the horn. Somebody has to move the chess pieces. But you are in this state of being. And it's almost like your mind is I would call it clarity. There's not a conscious sense you're thinking about stuff. In fact, you're overthinking. You're not in the zone. So there's a certain sort of perception where you're transparent. Like all of a sudden the basket in that one game. There's a unity. Not a great team player, but all of a sudden you sort of can sense where your teammates are. And the passes are just you in that zone. And your coach is always yelling at you that you can't play defense or you lose the ball or anything. Starts clapping for you. So, if you were to ask me that, in terms of if you take it away from Osensei, Shinto, mysticism, martial arts, what happens is that you say, okay, what's your experience? And then the challenge would be, you're a parent. Can you be a parent from that zone? You're a musician. Chet Baker didn't know what note he was playing. But off of what was being put out there, he could move and blend and play. And there was a certain uniqueness to his sound in the way he emphasized certain notes. And I heard Baker play and sing. I said, he's special. When I watch Curry, there are other players that are really fantastic, but he understands the zone. Understanding it doesn't mean in, but so if your thing was to kind of settle into the chessboard, that was what I thought that the series did well. You're sitting opposite the Soviet grandmaster, the unbeatable. there's a part of you that doesn't back off. And you might not have that courage when you're in your ordinary state. But when you are in the zone, you don't back off. You don't necessarily attack with bravado. So, when the Japanese samurai warriors, we're talking about not just training the sword, but training in Zen. All this technical skill. And then there's kind of the zone. And so if we were to substitute, there are words like enlightenment. Well, the zone. And then for whatever reason, your surroundings, for a sense, probably the whole universe comes into focus. And your eye gets out of the way enough that all of a sudden, and one of the things is that you maintain your focus on the chessboard, the song of the moment, your position on the court in the situation, whatever you want to call it. And this was called flow. If you check the body, like for example with me right here, I feel a nice alignment. If I check my emotional state, and I'm kind of abstracting here, there's no fear. I mean, there are certain things, you should fear. I mean, this is a pandemic. Behave responsibly. I notice my breathing is, it's not so much there's breathing, there's breath present. My head is very clear. And you're involved, but you're not busy. There's a game, there's a song, there's a chessboard. And what you're doing there is you're involved, but you're not busy there. If you get busy, you get caught. Even if you're getting busy thinking how to win. You let it unfold, and you unfold along with it. That's the best I can do in terms of describing my experiences there. Okay? And we're in this pandemic. So people to settle. You'll find kind of yourself in that flow state. Or maybe you need something like a chessboard, or a basketball and a hoop, or a song and an instrument, or everybody's going to have something. Joseph Campbell said something interesting on that, and it's the power of myth. And it's always stayed with me, because what he said was that, here in the West, there's East, West. Okay, so in the West, what you're really looking for is the meaning of life. I'm working, there's a pandemic. what's going on here. But in the East, it's not so much looking for the meaning of life, but rather the experience of being alive. And that's something our sensei kind of hints at. You are quietly, even magnificently, alive when you're in that zone. It's not a theory, and it's not about effort. No matter how Sleepy Floyd tried, I don't think he ever touched that zone again. In that zone, he was godlike. No time, no space. Didn't matter if it was Michael Cooper, maybe the best one-on-one front court defender in the NBA, or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or that he had a minor leg injury, which was kind of messing with him. He was in that zone, it didn't matter. So what would it be like if we were, for example, to just simply the zone? We learn how to line up to that flow state. And in that state, for Sleepy, player I liked, actually. I liked Sleepy Floyd a lot. Warriors had some interesting players, even they were total crap. But there's no defender. How am I going to beat Kareem? What do I do to fool Michael Cooper? That place, I mean, I'm never going to be in that position. I'm not an NBA level basketball player, but in Aikido, it would be like there's no partner. There's just harmony. And yet, there's an interaction between you and your partner. And you feel kind of a communion with everything. If you were to ask me, for example, what in Aikido, if I ever had that experience, probably would come to my mind is we used to, when the area was a lot younger, we used to have something called the spring training. And the spring training was, there were different teachers, and they would teach in corners or have separate classes. But after a while, it's like you had 1, 2, 3, 4, then you go from corner to corner after a certain amount of time. But I think this one was more like it was Nado Sensei teaching. And he was kind of working borders. In other words, say there's a flow state, but we have various blockages. The I is life experience. So, there are gateways or borders. And I remember what happened was I was fasting. So it was like about the 6th day of a fast. I was drinking vegetable juices. And so all of a sudden, I get called up in front of the class to demonstrate. And one of the, sometimes it comes with an insight, it's like, okay, so, you're weaker because you are fasting for, this probably my 5th day of a 7-day fast. But sometimes you're too strong. And when you're weaker, you open and you allow the flow, and then the Do Sensei said, if I had to study anything, I would study the way Jack's hand moved in that motion. But that was, there'd probably been some other ones. But It's almost like you don't exist, but you're there. But there's the moment going on. And you're simultaneously, you don't exist, and you are also on a different level. You are the moment. So one of the things, for example, that, we can't do a lot of things with the pandemic. Dojos are closed, apt to be closed for a while longer. There's good vaccine news, but it's going to take a tremendous amount of time before we can actually open up and have full classes. But this can be good research time. And so that was the other thing that Fraser Zinson and I discussed, is the level of stress, even what you would call mental ill health, that something like this brings on. And, the model, the Zo-sensei during the war, World War II, in the Iwama, getting up every day, he had kind of his ritual. And then he would farm, teach a couple of kids. But he was kind of communing from that flow state. And in that flow state, there were allies or energies that he could talk to. And then, you can spot people that are kind of looking at it or trying to figure it out. I'm kind of, I don't know, give me a baseball bat, could I hit a home run? Put me with the ball in my hands with LeBron James with the last couple of seconds, could I pull off a Stephen Curry miracle? I don't know. But I'll tell you, Steph would not be afraid of that moment. And so a lot of Wo-sensei's rituals, his meditation, is probably to get him to that zone. And of course, he's being religious. Yeah, he said this. He said, I'm religious, but I don't teach religion. And so going into and coming from that flow state. So let's go into the next room. Okay. Okay, real position. Okay, and you're going to bear with me for a couple seconds when I put the lights on. So we just get a better image. So this here. And that goes on. And so and for those of you who maybe tuned in a little late, we're kind of examining the flow state. And the thing that's hit me recently, watching the TV show Queen's Gambit, chess masters come from that flow state. You're kind of almost able to see through time and space to proper alignment. They see opportunities. A great passer like Stephen Curry, the game's shifting, teammates, the other team, and boom, he can do that. Or all of a sudden he goes boom like that, throws a 60-foot pass to Kevin Durant, who dunks at the rim. And if you say, well, I'm going to practice that, yeah, you can practice it. But practice is to keep you kind of close to that flow state. So certain things, like one of the reasons I was really attracted to Tai Chi, was no partner, me and the movements. It's a flow state. And in Aikido, a lot of times, people, you got your partner, you're working out something with a partner. But there are those moments where there is a partner and there's not. There's you, that flow state, and your partner is a part of the flow, and they feel it. All right, so there's a unity. The flow state brings out a unity between you and that and you. It goes both ways. So yes, you have a partner. In fact, sometimes if you go into your training, you probably really like training with this person, and you may also kind of like training with that person, and maybe you have difficulties with another person, because in some sense, a flow state is for you more achievable with this person or that person. Okay? So, whether this movement is a Tai Chi movement, or it's dribbling a basketball, or it's picking up a musical instrument. I kind of notice, for example, I don't think the flow state is about breathing. But for me, I'm breathing. Now, there's something called breath happening. And that doesn't mean that I'm not breathing out and breathing in, but it's my feet are very present. Now, I can practice feeling the body more and studying the movement of the body, but it's almost like, when you're in that flow state, you're kind of in a total body state. And you might have a certain limited knowledge about something, but when you're in that flow state, there's a different level of mind there. And there's a clarity here that there's kind of a nice, it's a warm feeling. It's not like I'm going to win the game. It's more like, whoa, there's a whole bunch of stuff I never saw. Boom, or boom. And so sometimes, we get into these things and we got to make it happen, we got to do that. Whereas the flow state, there's the happening and we're a part of it. And our being a part of it also triggers the happening. And the happening triggers that happening within us. And there's kind of a synergy between whatever your activity is, whether it's playing chess, which I don't do, or playing music, or executing an athletic move, or swinging a sword. So within that, what we have is, just standing here. But since they said it, so all I got to do is really just stand here. But he was talking about the flow state. So if somebody's coming, he would move on for this. It wasn't like he was reacting and moving. It was all of a sudden, of course. Right? And probably he had that feeling there's no separation between his partner, the attacker, and him. And they were both moving in terms of a unity with the larger movement of the universe. And there's probably a body field state that he was in, a mental clarity, and almost like a spiritual sort of union with everything. That would be my particular understanding of it. Now, most of the time, we're kind of caught up working with a partner. We're trying to learn a movement, which of course is important. But we stay with that. And maybe there's always a zone present. How big is the zone? It's big. But there's also a presence right here, right now. See, I don't know how far I was shooting from in that basketball game, but the coach says, Wada, you got deep range. I said, I do? Yeah, I can make shots. He didn't let anybody else do it. They were the ones who played a lot because they dribbled better, passed, and they're better defenders. But I do that one thing. Right? Okay. So, checking. Yeah. Just almost, because I kind of, one of the things that I do, I work a lot with this because, I'm moving this way. It puts me kind of what I call into, some level of a flow state. The hands move, the staff moves, the movements are spirals, circles, or beams, boom, boom, boom. Or sensei's thing like fly, like lightning, boom, strike like thunder, boom, boom. Those are words. What does it feel like? You move like a beam of light. You move like a beam of light. You fly like lightning, boom, you strike like thunder. You strike like thunder, boom. And those words don't make too much sense, except they're kind of poetic. Oh, I'm gonna move like a beam of light. Boom, 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 boom. You can switch from the beam of light to flying like lightning, boom, to striking like thunder, or boom, really striking like thunder. So the words can get in the way. Well, how do I? So for me, I noticed my breathing. It's not just my breathing is deeper. I'm kind of in that state where the breathing's going up, but there's breath. And there's kind of a nice ground. There's kind of an intimate feeling with the ground. And instead of a lot of activity here, there's more of a clarity. Boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Somebody says, what was that? Kata is not a kata. You know this change. You know this change, this change, this change, this change, this change. Boom, your mind clears. Your body's in that relaxed state. And boom, 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 boom. If need be, boom, you can move like a beam of light, fly like lightning, boom, strike like that, strike like that, boom. Handle a quick flurry or boom, stretch a movement out. So for me, something like this, I try to do the same thing by playing music or something. At a basketball, I go out there and I warm up a bit, but feeling the zone. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom. They're so basic to learn. We get so busy. Now, if I don't have any information, I might go, I know I would watch O-sensei, I first started when Robert Fraser Sensei and Nado Sensei, I consider those two to be my first teachers because they were so close at that time. Boom, 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 boom. I would watch O-sensei, and there would be clips of him here and boom, 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 boom. And I just said, he's just in this energy field, this spiraling, boom, boom. And then, what happens? You learn how to do stick, And then you get caught up in that form forever. Or boom, boom, boom. So we were talking last time, you gotta creatively, introspectively mess around. whether you're into this or into this. Boom, 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 boom. So if you pick this up, it's you moving the staff, but it's also you in that zone. So this motion, boom, there's a flurry, boom, boom. It goes to a pause, boom, boom, which can explode or settle back down. It's just wherever you are. There's a flow. You're moving from flow to flow to flow to flow to flow to flow to flow. And yeah, you have to have a certain amount of knowledge, but at a certain point, to be honest with you, I don't want to know, because when I know, I get too busy out there. All right? How did I learn to do some of this stuff? By respectfully messing around. Boom, 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 boom. Movements within movement. Give the ball to Stephen Curry, he's going to see possibilities within possibilities. Give the horn to Chet Baker, surround him with some very good people in a quartet, and he's just going to see possibilities. Or, the Beth Harmon character in Queen's Gambit. Opening move. All those possibilities opening up. If I were, for example, just to say, okay, like for example, usually my knees bark at me when I do this because I don't say so that much anymore. But, we're doing some flow practice, and I already feel kind of deep, even though I haven't sat this way. If you're to ask me if I'm seeing extra dimensionally or something like that, there's just a clarity here. And there's a warmth in here. There's a feeling of depth underneath. And a good alignment with the upper half. Upper, under, here. But if you get too caught up in describing it, what happens is you tend to get too caught up in the words, get too busy. So I think mentally, physically, even spiritually, there's positioning in that flow state. And my guess would be, well, Sensei's Ame no Ukihashi, that floating bridge of heaven, is simply a spiritual positioning in that flow state, not just a mental one or a physical one, but a spiritual positioning, which of course amplifies this and this. And more than anything else, it was probably a core feeling of being alive. I'm pushed by all this stuff that's going on. Or I calmly settle and I detach. This is more like, no, there's all this stuff going on. And there's me here. And from the state, I see what's going on in a little better place. And this state is going on here. Now, again, for me, the breathing, since this is how we start with breathing. Why? Because, what do I do? I'm just going to sit. But on those flow days, it's almost like, your breathing goes to breath very quickly. And what is that for me? It's like breathing slows and deepens. But all of a sudden, you kind of don't know that you're breathing, but you are. It's a breath place for me. And the under kind of fills in. If Stephen Curry had to make a big free throw, I'm sure he kind of bounces a ball a couple of times and hits this place. He has to take a game-winning shot. all that there, it probably starts going slow motion for them. So things like sitting, meditating, moving, what you find brings out the creativity in you. It's getting you closer to, or me, closer to the zone. So, anyway, we are going to go into the other room. And let me see. Yeah, we have a couple of people. So this was kind of, if you came in late, I had lunch yesterday with Robert Frager. And one of the things that came up was kind of like flow. The flow is not something that's purely a mental thing or a physical thing. Anybody with a question or anything they'd like to share? Again, when you're there, I mean, one of the things about the Hototama, you're able to speak my sense from that flow state, or that flow state speaks through you. You're still there. Without you, that state exists somewhere, but you're kind of with a place within yourself that allows that to come into being through you. And it's interesting that you might have a proclivity for this, and you learn a lot out there and you lose the flow state. One of the major things about that is knowledge can get in the way. You have to know something. And at some point, you may rely too much on your knowledge and lose this. So this can be elusive. But in some sense, if you say, this is my priority, I'm not always going to be here, but the what if question, what if I could be this way as a parent? What if I could be this way if I'm a negotiator? Okay. And there's a real quiet, warm aliveness. So it's not a push. And sometimes what happens is, if you look at the Queen's Gambit, a lot of times people are kind of driven. But the flow state's not about being driven at all. You might be driven, and then you start to touch this, and you can't, driven might be a state. Most people work pretty hard because, champions understand this. And it's, as I said, sometimes you can have one moment like the Warrior Sleepy Floyd moment. He's still famous in Warrior history. They're a horrible team. But that one guy gunned probably the greatest Laker team of all time down, 1-on-5. And I remember watching that, and the Warrior announcer summed it up. And what he said is, Sleepy Floyd is Superman. There's no way one guy should be able to handle the greatest Laker championship team of all time. That was the only, I think they lost one other game. They played the Boston Celtics and lost one to a great, great, great Celtic team with Larry Bird. Other than that, the only loss that team had into the finals where they lost one more game was that Sleepy Floyd game. And could Floyd ever duplicate it? No. He was a good player. He can still play. But that magic, that's the other thing, it's magical, but it's also kind of ordinary. You're doing things that are very ordinary to you. And they have a profundity that oftentimes, what is that? Well, it's you dissolving into the zone, and the zone kind of dissolving into you. The zone for a sensei was the universal harmony of creation. And he dissolved back into it. And there was kind of a floating bridge of heaven place right there. Anybody want to share anything? So I don't know, just a lot of me talking today, but it was very, for me today, it's for whatever reason, very experiential today. Anybody? I guess the thing is, what do I do? Well, some sense, I mean, the zone doesn't necessarily preclude perfecting your craft. So you continue that way. But you also begin to realize there's like certain things keep you closer to the zone and certain things get you away from it. Like negative emotions, tend to keep you away from it. But also being a little too blank and passive keeps you away from it. I'm too involved out there. I'm too detached in here. There's that perfect blend of detachment and involvement. And after a while, it's not just you, it's you in that zone. And for Sensei, I think that zone was probably the harmony of the universe. That was his zone. And yes, he did sword and spear and threw people around. But that would be my sense of what his quote-unquote game was. Okay, anyway, so I hope you got something out of it. Let's see, tonight we'll be doing 7:30, a Tai Chi session. I think I'll go the first half hour with, just going over the 30 movements. So those that have completed it. And I think the last half hour, I'm going to take people into the 54 movements. The first part of it, and just see how you do with it. That's it. Okay, so I thank you for being here. I know these are very unsettled times. And one thing that Robert Fredrickson said and I talked about was, the actual sense of stress, psychological stress, emotional stress, the potential for emotional illness, because things that we take for granted are not there. I mean, that was the first time when we had lunch yesterday that Fredrick Sensei had gone out for lunch since the pandemic. First time I had gone out for lunch since the pandemic. And that means you go out maybe to get food or do these things, but you don't go out to go out. And when we don't have that, oftentimes, it affects us internally. And so, the actual sense of the zone, to learn to kind of be with ourselves in all this confusion, to be able to find our center, to be able to locate that sense of warmth here And where necessary, that detachment. And so we learn to navigate this very difficult stretch, all right? For us to some degree. I mean, you'd be surprised the amount of people that, I don't know, just are kind of lost right now. And there's a funny point where when you're in the zone, you lose the I in a certain way, but it's in a very healthy way. And you're able to detach from certain things out there because you are concentrating in the moment. And a lot of those things right now are sort of taken away. So we're concentrating in the moment on, to be honest with you, I would say we're a truer self, a truer beingness. And Don Juan, in the Castaneda books, he put it well. He was talking about how, Native American cultures, the Spaniards came in, they decimated our culture, absolutely destroyed it. He says there was one group of people that flourished during that time. It was so oppressive. So that was the shamans. And he said, throughout all that turmoil, he said there were levels of being reached that have never been equaled. Okay. So, it's not that, but we are all potentially, we have the archetype of the shaman. And the shaman is in communion with the zone. And through that zone with forces and energies and consciousness that oftentimes is feeling this. It's not that the shaman is detached. The shaman also is in touch with themselves at a certain level that can kind of dissolve into, and that out there in this harmony dissolves back. And there's kind of a nice warmth to it. When you're in that zone, you don't feel mean. You don't feel like you gotta punish anybody, but you're right on point. As I said, I felt it a couple times. To be honest with you, you're so busy working with somebody, learning a technique, or having fun. See, the zone is fun, but it's fun in a different way. I mean, there's me having fun, winning a game or doing well. This is the zone. Is the zone fun? I would say the word doesn't come there. The zone is the zone. So I guess what we'll do is we'll call it for today. So thank you all for tuning in. And we will be doing the Tai Chi tonight. So I'm going to end.